I mean, I'm so glad I have both of you. I mean, originally I thought it was just going to be one of you, but then your PR person said, let's just do both. I was like, great, because you two represent this symbiotic relationship that I've been trying to capture and understand throughout this whole deal. And now that you're both here, hopefully you can kind of give me both perspectives on that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? The relationship between farmer and restaurant and how that's been affected with COVID-19? That's up for either of you. Either of you can answer that.
Do you want to go first, Gary?
Well, I can go for it. You know, because we do have some of our members of Minnesota Farmers Union that was a big part of their business model, selling directly to a restaurant. When the COVID-19 hit, and the restaurants got shut down, they lost their market. So they had produce, whether it was cheese or vegetables or whatever it was, and even in some cases proteins, the meats, eggs. Yeah, they're sitting there with they had stuff to sell, and some of it's perishable, especially your like eggs and your vegetables. It's perishable, and if you can't find a market for it, it's a complete loss for the farmer. So it hit those the hardest, and it really hit all types of farmers, whether you're a farmer raising hogs for the so-called regular food chain in the packing plants got shut down. They lost their market too, so it really hit everybody, but it hit the ones selling direct to restaurants. It hit them the hardest right now because all of a sudden they had no market, and they're scrambling, trying to rebuild it, and as the restaurants come back online, that helps. But they had to scramble very hard to try and replace that market, and that's hard to do. Especially when you got a perishable product. If you don't have a perishable product, you have a little more time to work through it. It affects your cash flow. You won't have the cash, but you won't have 100% loss. But with a perishable product, some of those people took 100% loss on some of their production because they couldn't replace that market that fast. So it's as I said earlier, it's really affected all type of farmers, but hit those the hardest right now.
Some of the sad part about some of that, not so much for our farmers, but for maybe bigger scale farming, was just the disconnect between what to do with that food and how to get it to people who could use it or people who could need it, especially with this pandemic showed us, how many people are food insecure, how many people are struggling just to feed themselves, and to see food go to waste, or in other cases just be, intentionally like, we don't know what to do with this, we're going to dump it out. That's heartbreaking to see, especially, it's really heartbreaking.
Right.
And it hit, like food going to waste, it hit so fast, you couldn't move that product in a system and get it to the people of need. It just couldn't happen that fast. Over time, some of that is happening, but it just, it is a tremendous loss. And it's very heartbreaking, like Tracy said, because there are people hungry that could use that food.
Yeah.
Then they had, in some cases, they just had to throw it out.
Well, that makes me think of two things. As you were talking, I was thinking about, so one, I mean, have we seen, and I don't personally know, so I'm asking you, have we seen farmers or just farms themselves completely just disappear because of this? I mean, I don't really understand the severity of it in that context. And then two, and these are two kind of maybe complicated, long-winded questions, but then two, I wonder if we can create any systems in place now that this has happened. So perhaps this is something that we can learn from, so that we can take those food items and get them to people who need it in a time like this. Maybe it's more thinking out loud than a question, but I'm wondering if there's like a new process that can be kind of gleaned from that. But the first thing I want to ask is, I mean, how much damage did this do really? Did you see any of your peers go under? Is that a common occurrence in these times, or?
Well, I think, looking at the big picture, the farm bankruptcies are dramatically up through the United States. So yes, definitely we are going to lose some farmers on this. All types of farmer, all scales. So and a lot of it is due to the shutdown, some of the COVID, some of it's previous policies, just low prices. But the COVID definitely put pressure on the farmers, all prices, no matter what type of farmer you are. And then with the supply chain getting disrupted, that affect prices too. So we are definitely, because of the higher bankruptcy numbers are way up over the past. So
right. I've read that like farmers were in deep-ish waters before this even happened.
Yes.
with that.
Yeah.
So
They were. Farmers are struggling before this.
Right.
It's all due to the prices. We weren't getting a fair enough price to pay them for their labor and cost of living and our inputs and be able to make their payments to the bank. And so the COVID-19, just across the board, it was kind of on general commodities, it was about a 25% hit to the price, just like that. So when you're having trouble making it with the price ahead and all of a sudden you take another 25% off of that, it just doesn't work. And in some cases, like we talked earlier, the farmer that was selling, the local farm that was selling a direct chain to a restaurant, he lost a lot of, he lost 100% of his market, so he lost 100% of his income. And the bills are still there. Your inputs, your operating expenses, they didn't go down; they stayed the same, and that's a problem.
One thing that I've seen, though, I mean, yes, I guess this isn't a but, it's an and.
Right.
At least, Gary has experience with a much broader range of farmers than I do, the ones that we deal with at the Birchwood and the people that we are sourcing from at our new restaurant, or the more smaller scale, produce, and we also, our proteins and eggs and stuff we buy from smaller scale farmers. And what I've seen that they were able to do, one thing that COVID did is show us some of the insecurities and the issues in the food system, some of the problems that exist, such as, as you talked about when the meat processing plants were shut down, the bigger scale parts of the food system were really challenged with COVID. And so I think for consumers seeing that, I think it helped highlight for consumers, they're wanting to know where their food is coming from and to have a trusted source for that food. And so a lot of consumers went direct to farmers, and then a lot of farmers that were selling to us were able to pivot, that's the word of this,
right.
of this year, right? And sell direct. A lot of the restaurants that were the farmers that were selling direct to us, we're now selling direct to consumers. There's been, more developing of different kinds of CSA models. I mean, maybe you've seen that with some of your members too, like small farmers coming together to create a CSA that's an aggregate of what the different farmers are growing, and there's been some creativity there. And so, I mean, in the one sense, that's it's hard to say. I don't like using the word silver lining when we're talking about COVID at all, but I think it has shown people the importance of buying their food locally, knowing where their food comes from, and really making that connection with the farmer. And that's really what we're trying to do at our new restaurant downtown. I mean, it's what we've done at the Birchwood for 25 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's hard though. I mean, you take one of the farmers we've been buying from the longest, which is about 24 years now, is his name's Greg Reynolds. He's a Farmers Union member, has a farm, Riverbend Farm. It's an organic farm out in Delano, Minnesota. And we were one of his biggest markets. And we also supported Greg in other ways. I mean, we would send a crew of anywhere out to like 15 to 30 people once a month to go help out and work on his farm. We called them crop mobs. And, with COVID, we weren't able to gather people and do that. So, and he really, I mean, those were, we'd been organizing those for 12 years, and they were almost, he depended on that labor because he can't, it's so hard for small farmers like that to be able to pay a regular farm crew. So he's been affected, that's just an example of another way that, one of our farmers has been affected. It's just been harder for him to get all the work done. I mean, I've been out there a couple times. It's just really sad to see some of the fields, he's just kind of had to let go.
Really?
And I mean, he found out about the fair. We have this partnership with the Farmers Union at this Minnesota State Fair.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's
It's huge. And so we sort of, I'll say contract, in that it's an informal contract, but, in normal times, in the before times, I guess that's what everybody's saying now. In the before times, we would meet with our farmers in the winter, and we would, talk about the season last year's, we'd talk about what we bought from them, and we'd kind of project to the year ahead so they could have an idea of how much we'd be buying from them. And that helped them, help them plan. And so for Greg was one of our heirloom tomato farmers for the heirloom tomato sweet corn BLT, which if this were a normal year and we were having the fair, we would be selling 16, 17,000
Yeah,
of those, so that's a whole field of
Would you guys be there right
tomatoes.
now? Was the fair going on during this
We'd be
time?
getting ready for it. It would be starting Thursday. Would be the first day.
This Thursday
Yeah.
would normally be the first day.
Yeah, it would be normally the first day of the
Wow.
state fair.
Yeah.
So that's a huge
Crazy.
loss for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's-
for our farmers
yeah.
that we're planning to
Jeez.
sell to us. So anyway.
As Tracy said, and I've said that too, and you hate to call it a silver lining, but the one thing it did do was point out, as Tracy mentioned, the insecurities or the shortfalls in the food system. And some of the smaller farmers, even though they lost their markets completely at the beginning, they were able to pivot so that they come back. But it is a struggle. But I think the one advantage, even on the large scale, it shows the need for more small regional processing plants, whether it's livestock or even working together with vegetables. It's just a way to have a more of a local regionalized food system, which would benefit everybody. So.
Yeah, it seems like we have the very small and we have the
very
very
large.
big.
Right, there's nothing really in
it's
between.
That mid-scale that it's what's needed. And
Yeah.
that's where the struggle is.
Yeah, it's there, and we need that. And the other thing is, it's really pointing out, as Tracy mentioned, people want to know where their food comes. They want to connect to the farmer.
Yeah, that's huge.
As Farmers Union, we fought for labeling on the meat products for years, and we had country origin labeling for a while. Then we ended up losing it, and that would help all of our farmers, even the large-scale farmers. When the consumer is buying the stuff on the grocery store shelf, they want to know where that food comes from. If it comes, say, beef, if it comes from Minnesota, or if it comes from Argentina, people will choose to do that. So I think we fought that battle for years, and I think that that helps all farmers by having labeling, whether it's small or large,
yeah.
transparency. Yeah.
Yeah, because
how your food is raised.
If you're a consumer, don't you want to know when you're buying something, you're paying for a steak? Don't you want to know which country that the cattle was raised in? And I mean, I want to know what farm it came from. Much, not even just much less the country. But yeah, and it's interesting. When we first asked you, what was this show about, and you were talking to us, and I just think in this relationship between the farmers and the restaurants and the general public, unless they've worked in a restaurant before or lived, worked, or have relatives that have run a farm, I just don't think they know how either one of our businesses work. They just don't understand the business model that restaurants have been built on, and it's not a good model. It's not an equitable model. It's not a model that works for very many people, unless you're the owner. And I wouldn't even say it works for for owners. It doesn't work when you're especially now when you're going like this, let's minimize our losses. I mean, that's our financial goal right now. I mean, that's and in the before times, it's like, can we eke out 2%, and that's not even that's not even for me as the owner. That's just to have, what if my roof needs to be repaired, or what if our compressor goes out in the walk-in, like those kinds of things. It's a really hard business model, and it's hard to and so I would imagine it might be similar with farming and some of the systems. It's like it's hard to fix the wheel on a train that's speeding down the track, and but at the same time you can't just halt the train altogether, to try to, you can't really, it's hard to rebuild something from the ground up. Do you know what I mean by that? So, one of the changes that we've made at Birchwood is last July, actually, we eliminated tipping. And we moved from a tipping model, which tipping as a compensation model is very inequitable. It, favors the people who are working the service side of your operation, creates a dual wage structure so that the people who do the service are making one wage, and then they're also getting the tips, and the people who are cooking and washing your dishes, they're paid an hourly wage, and they don't have access, to those tips. And so we eliminated that and created a service charge model that allows, us to, what we did is we rebuilt our wage structure so that we could have equity between the service staff and the back staff. And that's just one tiny small step, and we're trying to look at everything about our operation right now, and our how we do we're not hiring right now. That's a hard thing, but we are looking at those kinds of systems, and we're just trying to find a way to operate in a more equitable fashion.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of things that you said there that I want to touch on. One of them being this idea of the train or the whatever moving so fast that we can't fix it. But
my other one was being the flight attendant on a plane that's flying across a burning ocean, and you have to fix the engine on the wing.
I mean,
that's what I felt like the past 5-6 months.
Really creative with these analogies. I mean, this time is so insane that you can just dream up the most crazy ways to liken it. But whatever you want to compare it to, I mean, I guess I was going to model my question off of the train one,
sure,
but
go for it. I like the train.
Did it? So, but I mean, and this also refers to the silver lining thing. So didn't COVID slow down the train so that we can at least try to repair parts of it that are broken? And I say silver lining because I know you two are referencing that you don't like using that term, but is this not a time to remind us that there are a lot of systems that really need fixing? Perhaps that we were just ignoring before, or not ignoring, but we're just completely ignorant to, or we're just not thinking about because we were just business as usual mode. And now we have this awakening of this horrible situation that has not only ended actual lives, but has really ruined people's livelihoods. Mm-hmm. Aside from all that, I just don't see the point in really focusing on how horrible this whole thing is. I would argue that silver linings are a good thing. We have to think that way, because that's just kind of how humanity has always thought, even in the worst times.
Sure.
We have been forced to maybe separate from our ego, rise out of our shells, and be like, all right, we got to get together and figure this out. And as you two are talking, I'm just noticing that you're thinking about things and talking about things that weren't being talked about before, like this in-between point between the super big farm and the smaller farm. I mean, I have friends who are farmers, and that's a conversation that I've never even thought of before, because all my friends are super small farmers, and they're always talking about the super big ones, but what's in between? Is that something that could be serviceable to restaurants and other industries? So I just feel like there's so many different solutions that can be kind of thought about and worked on right now. And if anything, that's a silver lining, I would say. Yeah, no, it's
I don't know how to answer that without especially being videotaped sitting here, but it's been, I mean, this is just, me speaking for myself, and I don't want to speak for Gary or for our partnership that's running the restaurant downtown, but it's been really hard. There's been a lot of different restaurant groups that have formed and come together out of COVID, and then, at Birchwood, my sort of, I guess, awakening to, really systemic inequities and, systems of oppression came when Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson. So that was sort of my, wow, this is how things work in our country, and it's pretty awful. And so it's because the kind of person I am, as a business owner, I feel a responsibility that I have this business, and it's also a platform that which I can help, create more awareness in my community. And I'd always been, I've always advocated about food justice and, taking care of our soil and, labeling GMOs and things like that. I mean, that's just been how, Birchwood has been a platform from these kind of things. But you can't really talk about, food justice when people in your community, are being shot or killed or suffocated by the police. Those two, food justice can't be separate from just, basic humanity. Black Lives Matter, that's my opinion. So when all these restaurant groups have come together, there's national groups, and then there's local groups here through COVID to help support each other through that. And then when this happening, I just, have found myself being in these groups feeling like, do I need to light my hair on fire to find
right.
people who are interested in looking at these things?
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
And I keep getting the same message. Oh, we have to wait. We have to get ourselves back up and running first. And this is the focus now. We have to get the federal aid package. We have to do this. And I'm just like, I guess we'll just have to try to keep figuring this out, on our own right now. Which is, I don't know. I like to do things in collaboration with other people. That's just part of who I am as a person, and it's been, I don't know, I'm sure people I know I haven't done enough yet, to make difference. But, we're working with a diversity, equity, and inclusion trainer. Her name's LaDonna Sanders Redmond. I don't know if you know LaDonna at all. She's actually the board president of the Seward Co-op, and she was their diversity and community engagement director when they did the expansion to the Friendship Store. So she helped kind of navigate a lot of those tensions that were happening when Seward wanted to go and open a co-op in that neighborhood. And she's very skilled. She's a Black woman, and so she's been doing. We started this work with her before COVID, and then COVID happened, and we had to pause. And then we were able to pick it back up because we were able to get a PPP loan, and you can use those funds. As long as anybody that you're paying on your payroll adds benefit to the enterprise. So we've been able to we keep doing that work, and that's just helping us as a staff, as a group together, uncover our bias and look at the ways. Why does our staff mostly look like us, white people? And we had a really interesting conversation about that over our staff meal the other day, and we were talking about we were asking every single person how they got their job at the Birchwood, and almost every single person was referred by a friend. You know what I mean? So when you recruit internally that way, tell your friends to hire their friends, you end up with a staff that mostly looks like you. And so that was just such you could just see the revelation that was happening when we were having this conversation for people. So I know that sounds very small, people over here dying, and here we are, you know what I mean, having these kind of conversations, but it's a start, and you got to start somewhere. So.
Right. Yeah. So this idea of like restaurant coalitions coming together to help each other, with you and the Minnesota Farmers Union, has your organization seen like a new sense of collaboration and coming together between farmers to kind of get through this time and to understand what's going on and to figure out solutions?
Well, a lot of that in the one thing that'll help, because we try and do a lot of work on legislation to try and advance stuff like that, and the shortfalls really broad public. So we're hopeful, because there are a few pieces of legislation at the federal level that will help some of this stuff to ramp up back. There's various pieces that are starting to move, and we're in this whole system. It's like a big ship. You just don't turn it around just like that. It takes time. So we're hopeful that we can use this, and like we mentioned earlier, try and get some funds and try and build a regional food system, and that it's really would be a big step to help all types of farmers, and especially the small medium farmers could really take advantage of that. And the bottom line was that put more families out on the farm, being part of their local community, supplying the local food system, and that's to everybody's benefit.
Right.
So it's all of agriculture. We need all types of farmers. We acknowledge that, but we also see the more farmers we can have, the better everybody is. It just helps we're just stronger as a community if we can have more families out there. And your rural communities will be a lot stronger. If we're allowed, and that's what we like about the partnership here. If we can source directly from some family farms, it allows them to be part of their local community, to send their children to the local schools, and be sustainable. So I guess that's
it helps keep those communities alive, right? I mean,
it's not, it equates back out through the whole rural too. It's not just, even though there's primarily the majority of the people are in Minnesota, in the 7-county metro area, we understand that, but they all eat, and farmers raise food, and all types of food, and that's why the more we can get, the more of the people we can get down here eating local from through a restaurant collaboration or whatever it is, the more families we can have outstate providing that food. Because it's all not going to come from one or two large farmers. The ideal system is to have multiple smaller, medium-type farmers help and feed into that system, and that's we're hopeful that we can take advantage of the COVID-19 and hopefully build towards that type of a system, which gets us more local and more families on the farm.